Sensei's Pious Lie, written by Akane Torikai, has been one of the most complex and thought-provoking pieces of media I've had the pleasure of coming across in recent memory. I've seen many stories that take the approach of adding edgier subjects such as violence and sexuality as a means of trying to trick readers into thinking their stories harbor more narrative depth than is actually present. Torikai's work on Sensei's Pious Lie harbors none of these pretenses, instead utilizing nuanced, well-crafted characters and a gripping overarching theme to move the story forward in a way only the strongest writers are able to pull off. Sensei's Pious Lie tells the story of Misuse Hara, a 24-year-old high school teacher who at first seems like a rather ordinary, if not slightly judgmental, introverted young woman. The very first page of the manga begins with showing the reader Misuse's worldview, which is a near cut-and-dry dyad between winners and losers. Misuse uses the splitting of a chopstick as a metaphor for the reality that no matter how hard one tries for equality in this world, one side will inevitably get a bigger piece of the reward. The most interesting takeaway from Misuse's descriptions are 1, its intense binarity, and 2, that she places men starkly on the winning side of the equation and women on the losing side. As chapters move forward, it becomes apparent how Misuse's worldview came into conception when it is revealed that Misuse was a victim of sexual assault at the hands of a deviant named Hayafuji, the fiance of her best friend Minako, though it is entirely possible that the seeds of this philosophy had been planted in Misuse long before her assault through her experiences in growing up in the male-dominated society of Japan. It would not be inaccurate to say that the mental fracture cemented itself following this trauma. Trauma is pervasive and often leaves the survivors with a starkly different worldview than they had before the event, and a common cognitive distortion following traumatic experiences is what is known as black and white thinking. Black and white thinking occurs when an individual grows to believe that things are either completely one way or completely another, with no in between within these two extremes. This happens as a result of one's altered perception that forms when one experiences something that completely shatters their sense of safety or well-being, making them doubt what they at once held as foundational perspectives or truths in their lives. What occurs over the next 400 pages in Sensei's Pious Lie is a character study on how sexual victimization can impact every facet of an individual's life, both internally and externally, and addressing the challenging realities of the complex relationship between the genders. So much of Sensei's Pious Lie seems to place a spotlight on the duality of the human experience, and something I appreciate significantly in the story is how the author Torikai Sensei is willing to challenge Misuse's worldview. A brief glimpse of this happens when Misuse makes a comment stating that just about every problem women experience comes as a result of male interference. Then, the next page after this statement is made, it shows a group of young high school girls berating another member of their friend group who just walked away due to her weight and the fact that any male would take any interest in her. The most significant challenge to Misuse's worldview, however, comes through the introduction of the character of Nisima, a 16-year-old high school student who was also a victim of sexual assault by an older female co-worker at his part-time job. The two individuals cross paths when school officials ask Misuse to have a conversation with Nisima about the rumors of his illicit relationship with an older woman. Misuse is brutally honest with Nisima and tells him that the school really only wants to maintain its reputation, so if he will just hurry up and say nothing really happened with the older woman, they can both leave and move on with their lives. The transparency Misuse keeps with Nisima makes him laugh, and he opens up to his teacher, telling her that he really did sleep with an older woman in a hotel. What surprises Misuse, however, are the circumstances of the event. Nisima tells Misuse that he really did not want to have sex with the woman, but he was forced to. Misuse coldly labels this as an excuse, telling Nisima that he is a man and could have easily left the situation if he chose. Nisima calmly expresses his belief to Misuse that there are certain forms of violence that are not about physical strength, and when he faced that kind of violence, he was unaware of how to react. When Misuse continues to state her disbelief at the student's words, Nisima expresses his belief that men and women are equal. To her own surprise, Misuse openly scoffs at this, telling Nisima that he is only afraid of the power he wields as a man, and that because he is a man, he will always be the aggressor and will inevitably end up defiling a number of women throughout his life. Nisima calmly counters this by saying that he did not ask to be born a man, the same way Sensei did not ask to be born a woman, and because of these circumstances, he believes that there has to be a way for the genders to interact peacefully and not cause harm to one another. At this declaration, Misuse involuntarily begins to cry, in large part due to the mirror being thrust into her face in the form of this teenage boy, whose own trauma greatly parallels her own, crashing headfirst into the notions of misogyny and lust for power that she believed the entirety of the male species carried. Torikai has done a marvelous job of making her characters feel true to life. Reality is messy, and this truth is reflected in the well-rounded philosophies of all the characters that we are introduced to. I appreciate so much that Misuse is not a perfect, always morally correct cardboard cutout of a character. The distortions in her worldview allow this story to tackle such important issues from a perspective that is rarely seen in media as a whole, let alone anime and manga. Specifically, trauma changes you. When one goes through something as heinous as sexual assault, you are not the same person afterwards, and Misuse as well as Nisima reflect this truth. They both have been uniquely affected through their negative experiences with the other gender, and watching their philosophies collide head-on is a bewitching sight to see. The subject of sexuality is rarely given as much respect in the medium of manga as it is in Sensei's Pious Lie. The fear and dysphoria both Nisima and Misuse feel towards female genitalia is a look at how traumatic experiences can lead to feelings of disgust and depersonalization, even towards one's own body. Both individuals are also deeply troubled by their relationship with the act of sex itself, with Nisima and Misuse being hypercritical of themselves for the mix of sexual arousal they experience while being assaulted by their attackers, coupled with the mind-numbing fear and powerlessness they felt at the same time. This feeling is something that is often expressed by individuals who have been assaulted, leading them to feel as though they themselves were responsible for their victimization and actually brought the attack on themselves, despite the perpetrator being the one that is solely responsible for their own actions, and they as a survivor were only doing their best to cope with the unforgivable actions being forced upon them. I would be remiss if I did not mention the significance that Akane Torikai's own female perspective adds to the manga. It is relatively well known that manga as a whole is a male-dominated medium, and as a result of this, many stories are crafted from the male perspective and worldview. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but as a result of this, reality, female nuance, and perspective can often be left out of the formula when discussing the narratives presented in manga. This is where I believe Sensei's Pious Lie greatly benefits from the worldview and experiences of its author. The subtlety and realism in which Misuse and her worldview regarding the dynamics between men and women are so well crafted that I believe it would be a significant challenge for an individual with only the male experience to fully form such a well-realized female perspective. This isn't to say that all men are unable to craft complex female characters, but I do believe that some of the most powerful and realistic portrayals in art come from those with lived experience, and this reality seems to permeate every page and image present in the manga. If you are looking for an intelligent and thought-provoking story that respectfully tackles mature themes in a way rarely seen in the medium, I highly encourage you to check out this first volume of Sensei's Pious Lie. Akane Torikai has created something truly special here, and I'm excited to see the rest of the narrative unfold. Quick side note, I've seen other creators mention that Akane Torikai Sensei is the spouse of Oyasumi Pum Pum creator Inyo Asano, and if this is the case, we got the storytelling power couple of the century right here. I just had to say something because I thought this was amazingly cool, and I hope that we see a lot more work released from these authors into the future. Take care everyone, and talk to you in the next video.